Joining us from Washington, Fox News analyst Charles Krauthammer. So you agree 100% with that memo. I can read your body language.
I think I'm in the high 30s right here, right now. No, look, I think basically what you're saying about Obama not using his power, I think that's the key point. He misuses his power on domestic issues, where he, as the executive, he takes over, writes the laws, changes the law, cancels the law, undoes laws, which you're not supposed to do. But on foreign affairs, I think he is simply so much over his head. He doesn't know what to do, and when he doesn't know what to do, he does nothing. He talks. He urges, he tries to use moral suasion on a thug like a Putin, and then he's surprised that nothing actually happens. On the border issue, I think it's interesting. I think on that issue, he's immobilized, not because he's over his head as he is in Ukraine or in Libya or elsewhere, but because he's so politically cynical. On the one hand, he's got his left and his strong support from some Hispanic activists who would oppose him if he did anything serious about closing the border, particularly in this particular situation. On the other hand, he's got the rest of the country that is appalled and aghast that we have lost control of the border and we have a crisis which is essentially of his own making in not enforcing the border. So he's immobilized. He doesn't do one or the other. So instead, he does nothing. And he makes a few speeches and denounces Republicans and pretends that if somehow they had passed comprehensive immigration reform, it would have averted this. Of course, it would have done nothing of the sort. If anything,
it would have encouraged it.
Of course, if you
would have encouraged more people if they had, look, pathway to citizenship. Come here.
If you pass an amnesty, you create a magnet for more illegal immigration.
My question is not a policy question tonight, because we've gone over that last week with you and with our other contributors here. My question is, I believe that President Obama doesn't see the border as a crisis, doesn't see the ISIS army as a crisis. He doesn't see Putin as this world menace. And he may see Iran as a crisis, but he just wants to string it on out because, as you said rightly, he doesn't know what to do. So he's basically living in a fantasy world, and that's dangerous for the country if the president's living in a fantasy world, right?
I think that's true, and I think it was obvious from the first 6 months of his administration. I was saying at the beginning, I wrote in a column and in a speech at the end of 2009 that this was a man, it was called Decline as a Choice. It happens to be the last chapter in my book, which is available at bookstores everywhere. But, you know, when I wrote about Decline as a Choice, I simply looked at what Obama did and said when he came into office. He goes abroad and he talks about the misuse of American power. He apologizes for, he didn't even apologize, he simply confesses America's sins, from Hiroshima to the maltreatment of Indians, to disrespect for Muslims, to lack of regard for Europe. I mean, the list is long and astonishing. This is a man who does not have faith in the goodness of what America has done abroad. And he will concede it for some things, but he largely sees it as misused, and therefore the fantasy world he lives in is one in which if American power is withdrawn, the world heals. And of course, precisely the opposite.
But a logical thinker then, if they started off the way you described, and then they saw how all of the problems are worsening, all right, then would say, you know, maybe I was wrong. But I'll tell you what, I think he's so disassociated from reality. We're going to talk about his golfing and all of that in a minute, coming up after you, that right now President Obama is locked into this ideological fantasy world, the kind of world that they teach at Harvard, where you adjudicated and so did I. They teach a fantasy world at Harvard, a world of what should be, not of what is. And therefore, when you see what is, you turn away and say, you know, no, I'm not going to deal with that. I really believe that's what's causing all of this stuff. Last word.
I'd like to blame Harvard, and it is responsible for 90% of the world's ills, but not this one. Obama's fantasies about the world predate Harvard. You go back to what he was doing in Columbia, University, where he not only supported the nuclear freeze, which was a nutty idea. He thought that we should essentially unilaterally disarm our nuclear weapons. He has always had the view that American power abroad is destabilizing, often unjust, and brings bad consequences. If anything, it's the Iraq War that made that even more of a strong, and as you say, it's the basic element of his ideology. It's almost a religious idea for him. And therefore, he believes, you withdraw our power, the world improves. And you're right. All the evidence has shown that he's wrong, but nonetheless, he persists.
He persists.
And that's the definition of a fanatical belief, and he seems to have it.